Hey everybody, this is Reformed Orthodoxy here. Sorry for the lack of uploads. I've been sicker than a dog, but I'm okay now. So without further ado, this is Chapter 8, Hour by Hour of Surviving Hitler aboard the Nazi death camps. Though Jack tried not to think about his family, thoughts of them sometimes sneaked up on him. His eyes instantly filled with tears. Papa, Mama, Yeja, Jacob, how we miss them. He willed himself to picture each one of them in safety and comfort. Papa was in a camp, yes, but perhaps he was a tailor there and worked in a warm place inside. Mama and Jacob were with his uncle back in the village, and his sister had managed to join them. After the war was over, everyone would return to the beautiful apartment in, hold on, I can't remember the name of it. I gotta go back. Gdynia. All their friends and relatives would come again for large gatherings, including grandfather. Jack would hold his hand as they walked along the beach and watched the ships coming into port. At dinner, there'd be so much food they could not even think of eating it all, and never again would they be hungry. Then Jack would snap back to reality, his stomach almost turning inside out from hunger, his body infested with lice, men all around him dying from hunger, disease, and sorrow. We tried to help one another, he said, but people disappeared so fast. They would be transferred to another camp or they'd die. You could tell a week ahead who would die. They would get a sort of frozen look on their faces. We knew they didn't want to live any longer. As strange as it sounds, we got used to death because we saw so much of it. It took me a long time, but I learned to think of the dead as fortunate because they weren't suffering. I hoped Aaron and Moshe and the other men I known in this first camp were still alive, but I would never be able to find this out. Jack lost track of passing days. By watching the seasons, he knew he had been in captivity for almost a year. He had become 16 when the winter turned to spring in 1943, but he had no way of knowing which day was his actual birthday. In a concentration camp, you can only think of staying alive, Jack said. Every day, every hour was a new challenge. You had to be constantly alert and protect and care for yourself the best you could. You were always on the lookout for a scrap of food. It was very stressful. The only relevance weather had for us was for what obstacles it had presented. Were we freezing, wet, or suffocating from heat? We were always hungry and exhausted. That never changed. Sorry about that. I had to burp. We had no knowledge about the war or who was winning or losing. The guards told us nothing. And this picture here shows the guard towers surrounding the concentration camps. The guards would keep careful watch on the prisoners. Rumors were part of daily life. Prisoners lived on them. Rumors about the war, rumors about upcoming selections, when the SS officers would weed out the weakest prisoners and ship them off somewhere. Rumors about transfers to other camps. Every day, Jack said, you wondered, how do I get assigned to less difficult work? How do I make contact with a civilian on a work detail who would slip me a piece of bread from time to time? In a short space of time, Jack was moved twice to other camps. They took us where they needed us to work, he said. The camps were different yet alike. Some overcrowded barracks with the same number, same food, thin soup, bad bread, same rules, same lice, same filth. Same guard towers with searchlight where guards watched you with binoculars, their machine guns at the ready. Always a crematorium with its black smoke. You went to bed in the dark and awoke in the dark and recounted in the dark so you'd be ready to work when it was light. They beat you for every tiny thing. This right here is the Gross Rosen concentration camp. It had the ironic words, Arbeit macht frei, which means work makes you free in German. Hey, Ruger. says it right here. I don't know if you can see it. I'll switch also had these words. Okay. One of the worst camps Jack was in was called Gross Rosen. He and the other prisoners arrived late at night. No barrack space was available for them. They were ordered to sleep on a cold concrete floor with no pillows or blankets. We were so overcrowded, we were forced to lie on our sides. If one person turned, we all had to turn. But even in this circumstance, sleeping was not a problem. Not ever. We could have slept standing up, Jack said. This picture shows the quarry at the Gross-Rosen concentration camp, which is now filled with water. When Jack was there, many prisoners died because of the brutal working conditions. Many others committed suicide by hurling themselves off the ledge into the pit of the quarry. And I'm not gonna do that wimpy unalive. That wimpy word unalive. Knock it off. Sorry about that. You can come after me all you want, YouTube. I'm an American and I have freedom of speech. But anyway, the camp had a granite quarry where many other prisoners lost their lives while carrying chill. The camp had a granite quarry where many prisoners lost their lives while carrying heavy pieces of granite up the steep steps. They could slip and plunge to their deaths. Every week, at least a dozen prisoners committed suicide by hurling themselves into the pit, Jack said. Fortunately, I was in that camp a short time. Sorry about that. Conditions were brutal. I saw many terrible things there. Because Jack worked hard and didn't complain, he escaped the worst wrath of the capos and guards, though he occasionally received the kick and blow like everybody else. Going out of his way to get along sometimes paid off. In one camp, instead of food being served in a central outside location, the soup was carried from barracks to barracks in a large kettle. Jack was selected to help carry the heavy kettle. A dangerous job because of its weight and contents. But for his efforts, he was usually given an extra bowl from the very bottom of the kettle where it was the thickest. One time he was assigned to help build a sandbed for a railroad. Working around him were civilians on forced labor details, just as he had been at it back at his uncle's village. They still had enough to eat. I would beg for bread or they'd slip me some without my asking, Jack said. This lasted only a couple of months, but it kept me going. If it was more than a scrap of food, I shared it with the other prisoners. They did the same with me. Surviving the work assigned to him was another challenge. One of Jack's jobs was at a chemical plant. He helped load and unload chemicals into railroad cars. Sometimes he worked inside the plant. Civilian workers with masks and gloves had masks and gloves to protect them from the chemicals, but we prisoners had no protection. Sorry, I stutter a lot. This picture shows prisoners working on their forced labor details. When they could no longer work, they were killed. Many starved to death or died of disease. The fumes were very strong and burned our eyes and throats. If I stayed there long, I believe the chemicals would have permanently damaged my lungs. Another one of his jobs was to unload cement bags from the railroad cars. Guards with their vicious German Shepherd dogs stood over the prisoners. The boxcar was about 4 feet off the ground, and the prisoners had to walk down a shaky wooden plank with a bag as heavy as a man on his shoulders. If you fell off the plank and dropped the bag, it would split open, making a mess. Then the dogs would instantly be on you. Going down that plank was scary, but I remembered how I used to dive from ships in the harbors of Gdynia, Jack said. That was scary too, but it was fun. So I pretended this was a boyhood game, and I never fell. Prisoners always watched for opportunities to help themselves. The thickly padded empty cement bags had special value. They could be made into vests if you tore holes out for your head and arms. They could help block the wind and the cold and keep you from freezing in the winter when you were working outside and had only a thin uniform on. Doing this hurt nothing, and yet it was forbidden, Jack said. Some of us did it anyway. One of our guards carried a bamboo stick and would strike us across the back to see if we were wearing the cement bag vests. If so, we were punished, but I was never caught. The worst part of the day was roll call. Not only did it mean standing at attention for hours on end, but it was also when prisoners were punished for some slight infraction or terrorized at random. Everyone was forced to watch when a prisoner was whipped, beaten, shot, hanged, or torn apart by the dogs. In one camp, 6 Russian prisoners of war managed to escape, but they were caught later on. Their bullet-riddled bodies were dumped in the middle of the parade ground, and the prisoners had to march around them. This picture shows a guard tower and the electrified barbed wire fence at Auschwitz. They were typical guard towers and fences at all the concentration camps and labor camps. But there is grass in this photo. Had there been any during the war, the prisoners would have eaten it. We were warned this would happen if we tried to escape, Jack said. Every single one of us fantasized about escaping, but to where? All of Europe was occupied by the Nazis. There was no place safe for anyone Jewish. The Russians had a homeland to return to. We prisoners didn't. We Jews didn't, sorry. What also kept us from trying to escape was knowing that even if they succeeded, many other prisoners would be killed in retaliation. The Nazis terrorized us into doing what they wanted, Jack said. In photos, you can see the dirt and starving skeletons of prisoners in the concentration camps, but you can't smell the fear. Fear is so devastating. To survive the Nazi concentration camps, death camps, you had to be very lucky and very clever. Jack was determined to survive. I believe my family was waiting for me. When this was over, they would all be there, outside the camp to greet me, and I would have beaten Hitler at his game.